Okay, recording has started, and this evening Paul will be talking with us. And I would like to just introduce him as a teacher, an archaeologist, an author, poet, probably a historian at some level too, and a good friend. And we'll be looking forward to what he has to bring us this evening. Deb, would you like to offer the opening prayer?
Yeah, if you'll go ahead and bow with me, please. Our Lord and our Creator, we thank you once again for this beautiful day that we've had to remember those who have died in service of our country. Our country is blessed, even in spite of the turmoil that we experience on a daily basis. So, Lord, we would ask that your Spirit would be with our gathering tonight as Paul shares his presentation on history's destiny. And may we continue to do so in a spirit of camaraderie and fellowship and friendship that has brought us all together over these past many years. We thank you for these opportunities in Jesus' name. Amen. And
Paul,
Paul, you're still muted.
There now. Hopefully, I'm no longer muted, and hopefully, History's Destiny and Introduction is in front of you.
It is, but it's not full screen. I don't know if you want to make it larger or not, but we do have it in front of us. We've
It's
got
full screen in front of me, and so let me try again because did I get it?
it's not full screen.
It's not. Well, let me try again, just because I want you to be able to see full screen, because I can see full screen. Therefore, I thought you could too. And that's this one. Share.
There you go. Now you made it smaller again, but
I did.
yeah.
That's curious. All right. So how'd that happen? Hmm. If I could go back to where it was, let me do that. Can you tell me when you got it right? And that way I can stop, presuming that I can see it too. But
You're,
since I'm missing one lens of my glasses tonight, and I feel just a little bit of an impediment here.
you're,
Okay, leave it there.
You can see that? Okay.
Yes.
you're too,
So if I if I don't go to the slideshow, then you see it better.
your two screens are mixed up. When you're, when you're, when you're sharing yours, the one that's coming to us is the one that should be on yours, and you're getting the full screen that should be on ours.
Okay, so how do I fix that?
Ah,
Do I still have you in front of me, or let's
th-
see
it,
if I go to here.
look at your,
There.
look at your, oh,
If this works, then let's go with it.
You've got it. Yep. Now it's
you got
even
it.
bigger, so
You
it's
got it.
good.
All right, good, good. Thank you. I appreciate your patience with me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have a chance to address you this evening on a question that nobody in his right mind would address, I'm confident. On the other hand, I think that it's rather important for us when we are on Memorial Day to reflect not only on the past, but to look at where that past is taking us. And I'm intrigued, especially because of the trip to Egypt. I've become intrigued by comparing the arc of history as seen in different cultures, and for us to be able to compare other cultures' arc of history is the intent tonight. And so I'm asking the question, just what is the intellectual of history, looking at it across the spectrum of cultures? What do the various cultures have to say about it? What roles can we play in fulfilling our mission, and what is the divine plan? So we're going to be looking at myths. That is to say, anthropologically, all myths are true to their cultures, and they transmit truths through generations, which may or may not be based upon the facts, but they claim themes pointing to the end of times, human purpose, or divine plan. I just had dinner with a gentleman at Jason's Deli, for whom the point was interesting because he was excited about the numerology significance of number three. In American culture, notice we teach our kids ABCs. We have them watch CBS, NBC, ABC. We uh, we have them eat with a knife, fork, and spoon. We have them watch we'll keep time on a clock, which is all divisible with threes. We give our kids three names. Why do we do that? What is the power, the magic of the rhythmic trichotomy of the number three? Well, in American culture, it is highly significant. And so here's one of those truths that makes it so that we put all of our arguments on threes, three reasons, three wishes at the wishing well. I mean, it's just mystical how profound that fundamental truth is in our culture, and yet we so readily ignore it because it comes to us through all of our nursery rhymes, the three bears, the three pigs. We just simply embrace it, and it becomes an enculturated device by which we understand reality is built upon that. It's built upon the tripod that allows us to give good support and therefore base our understanding and understand truths upon it. And so, if we're going to transmit truths to kids, then being able to put those in myths and make it so that they can be passed on that way is significant. And among the most significant myths we have are our creation myths. And so I'm going to use some creation myths this evening in the presentation to help highlight the direction that our history is taking us to focus upon the end of times for divine plan and human purpose. I would also like to highlight that I'm going to be talking a bit about calendars, and I recognize that the sketch I'm giving in both myths and calendars is very cursory and incomplete, and probably I should have made this into a um, multiple session event. On the other hand, I've been speaking far more than my share, I think, and so I'd like to get other people doing their share. As a matter of fact, I've got an open spot on June 15 that is still open and available. And if anybody would like to volunteer to cover that one for me, I'd appreciate it because I'm also scheduled to speak or to teach a class at the Lamona reunion on that one, and it would be awfully nice to have a presenter for that one. And then we get into August in July and August, there are a few spots left, but September is almost filled up already. Anyway, I wanted to highlight that calendars and creation accounts usually embed the myth themes that are significant to a culture. And they provide us a point of demarcation in this study. So I'm going to begin with Genesis, but I'm going to share Genesis by reading the creation by James Weldon Johnson. But let me highlight that I am going to predispose you, to encourage you to look at the beginning. What in the beginning was there? And across the cultures, we'll find, my experience is that we find virtually every culture goes back to some kind of a big question mark. We call our question mark God. Other people make multiple question marks and say gods. The evolutionist people would say it's a big bang, but it's a big question mark. So we're going to see those big question marks in a number of these accounts. But in the beginning, well, there's so much we don't know. And so how do we come to grasp the infinite nature of divine who is beyond time, creating the finite? And so because that is so far beyond our ability to grasp, then we struggle with it. But I think understanding that in the beginning a big question mark is proves to be a commonality that reaches across all the cultures that I have found so far. At the end, I want us to use the Claude Lévi-Straussian strategy. Claude Lévi-Strauss proposed that if you study mythology, you will find that it has diachronic and synchronic themes. The diachronic themes are the ones that go through history, and you'll see them repeated time after time in every presentation. The synchronic themes are the ones that show up as significant on a given presentation. So we're going to look at the synchronic themes for these 6 creation accounts, but then I'm going to lay a chart out for you so you can begin to see some of the diachronic themes as well. So with that beginning, let me I'll warn you that we'll be looking at Genesis, at the Maya, and I've got a question on here about the Maya because the Maya give us a very specific date of something that happened some 5,000 years ago, but it's the date upon which the beginning of the Maya calendar is established. And so I find it very curious, just what was it that happened that caused August 11th of 3114 to be identified as the beginning of the calendar. Our calendar roughly begins with Christ, but we're several years off, and we know it. But the Maya calendar was more accurate than the one that we use today. And so I'm curious, what was it that they got started with? And then we'll be looking at the Hopi, the Egyptian, the Chinese, and evolution to get a quick examination of all those themes. And because, of course, the old teacher is anxious to have people have a chance to share in the discussion, I am open to your questions, although not during the presentation of The Creation by James Weldon Johnson. And I should get a drink first. And God stepped out on space. And he looked around and he said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the light broke, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other. And God said, That's good. Then God reached out and took the light in his hands. And God rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun ablazing in the heavens. And the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball, and he flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and the stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he hurled the world. And God said, That's good. Then God himself stepped down. And the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left. The stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked. And where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. And then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over to the edge of the world, and he spat out the 7 seas. He batted his eyes, and the lightnings flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunders rolled. And the waters of the earth came down. The cooling waters came down. Then the green grass sprouted, and the little red flowers blossomed. The pine tree pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread out his arms. The lakes cuddled down in the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea. And God smiled again, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around his shoulder. Then God raised his arm, and he waved his hand over the sea and over the land, and he said, Bring forth! Bring forth! And quicker than God could drop his hand, Fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, split the air with their wings, and God said, "That's good." Then God walked around and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at his sun, and he looked at his moon, he looked at his little stars. He looked on his world with all its living things, and God said, "I'm lonely still." Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river he sat down, with his head in his hands. God thought and he thought, till he thought, "I'll make me a man." Up from the bed of the river God scooped the clay, and by the bank of the river he kneeled him down, and there the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hand, this great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Amen. 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 Now I recognize that presentation of the creation account according to Genesis may not be quite standard, but I love it. To me, it is such a marvelous, culturally erudite representation. And so you're certainly welcome to other cultural additions, but I think you would recognize that one captures most of the essential themes of the Genesis account. So now, when we look at history's destiny through the eyes of the Maya, and at this stage, if you would like to interrupt with questions or comments, I'm going to be much more open for that. But during the reading of the James Walter Johnson poem, I didn't want to be interrupted. But for the rest of these, you're welcome to interrupt. The Maya were expert timekeepers, and like us, they divided the passage of time into recurring periods. Rather than counting in neat centuries and millennia, though, the Maya calendar consisted of two interlocking systems, the Hab, which consisted of 365 days, and then the 260-day Tzolk'in. Making modern imperial units of the measurement seem positively straightforward, the Maya calendar tracked both of these timetables simultaneously until they finally aligned every 52 years. This meant that scheduling the events further ahead than this was therefore not feasible, which is why the Maya also developed the long count calendar. And the long count consisted of 5,126 years and was split into 13 equal segments of 394 years, known as Baktuns. The Maya began counting the previous long count on August 11 of 3114 BCE, which means the 13th Baktun of that cycle was due to end on December 21 of 2012. It happens that on December 21 of 2012, I had the privilege of speaking at one of our local Kansas City church congregations. And of course, I couldn't help but make strong reference to this because as an anthropologist, it just is so intriguing to me that the Maya calendar is more accurate than the one we have by 1/10,000th of a day. The Maya expected a new Baktun to begin when the previous one came to an end. There was no judgment day, no planetary implosion, certainly no alien rescuers to come out of any of the artifacts that are surviving. And there was no question but that the sun would rise as normal on December 22 of 2012. And evidence to support that came in May of 2012. The archaeologists in Soltun, Guatemala, unearthed a nearly complete Maya astronomical table, which calendars stretched 7,000 years into the future, showing that the Maya did not simply stop counting in 2012. But it is interesting, I think, to note that in the Maya projection, the new dispensation, the one that we are now in, will see women rule in peace. The previous dispensation, which has fundamentally been that of the empire builders, will be laid aside by people who become people of peace. And so I'm encouraged by that to believe that my job as a person of peace at the Joseph Smith III site in Lamoni might possibly have some historical help. In the Maya creation process, the gods Tepehu and Gukumats created man to return praise for them. Their first effort, and this is in the Popol Vuh, we had the Thomas Murphy presentation on the Popol Vuh some months back, showing that the native scriptures may very well have a lot to teach us as well. And so I'm wanting to reinforce that here. Tepehu and Gukumats created man to praise him, praise them. First man they made out of mud. And they shaped him, breathed on him, and put him by the bank of the river. And when the floodwaters came, he dissolved. He simply was not made durable enough. And so the second one they made out of stone. And the man of stone was durable, but he was awfully hard-headed. And he did not give praise to Tepehu and Gukumats, and so he ended up being swallowed by an earthquake. So now Tepehu and Gukumats put their heads together to ponder just how do we make a man that is durable and yet not so hard-headed that he can't give us any joy. So they made him out of wood. And they breathed on the man of wood and gave him life, and he began rather ecstatically to live and to praise God, praise each other. But then he began to get into yelling and screaming arguments, began to burn the pots and pans on the fire. The males became mean to the females, and the females got to learn to be mean to the males back. And Tepe and Gukumats had enough of this. We'll consign them to the trees, and we know them today as monkeys. And then Tepehu and Gukumats had to put their heads together again to figure out how do we make a man who will return joy to us. So they pondered, and they finally found the perfect material, maize, corn. And that is the creation that may have actually happened on that August day of 3114 BCE. In any case, I want you to note that it is amazing that we are creatures out of corn, and most of us may be a little bit corny, but are not willing to attribute that to the divine. But perhaps we should. All right, moving to the Hopi. And in the Hopi account, we find that 4 successive worlds have been guided by Spider Grandmother and created by the Sun Spirit Tawa. Notice the combination here, the Spider Grandmother and the Sun Spirit Tawa. The humans evolved from creatures into people, leaving lower worlds due to corruption, finally entering the 4th world, which is the one we're in, through an opening in the Grand Canyon. And so this one has very, very specific locations identified in the account. Tawa is the creator, and it was he who formed the first world and made that out of Tokpila, or the endless space, and he made the original inhabitants. It's traditional for Hopi mothers to seek a blessing from the sun for the newborn children. Well, Spider Woman made all the plants, the flowers, the bushes, the trees, and then the birds and the animals, using the earth and singing the creation song. And when this was all done, she made the human beings using yellow, red, white, and black earth mixed with her saliva. And I should have probably highlighted the yellow, red, black, and white to highlight the differences of men that she created. When she sang the creation song, she made 4 men, and then she made 4 women. And at first, they had a soft spot in their foreheads, and although it later solidified as they got older, it left a space through which they could hear the voice of Sotunang, their creator. Because these people could not speak, Spider Woman called on Sotunang, who gave them 4 languages, and his only instructions were for them to respect their creator and to live in harmony with him. And I wanted to highlight for you that children with soft spots in their heads are considered by the Hopi to be spiritually sensitive, whereas us old people who soft spots become hard-headed um, tend to be much less spiritually sensitive. And so that's an area where we need to refocus ourselves. Okay, the people that had been created were spread across the earth and they multiplied. And despite their four languages, in those days they could understand each other's thoughts anyway. Think Pentecost. And for many years, they and the animals lived together as one. Eventually, however, they began to divide both the people from the animals and the people from each other as they focused on their differences rather than their similarities. And I wanted to give that special emphasis because notice that in this forum, it is our intent to work from our commonalities rather than to attack our differences. And by working from our commonalities, we've been able to work out amicable relationships, even though we disagree. We've had the land of Nephi in Guatemala, in Peru, in Mesoamerica, in um, Chesapeake. We had it in the Malay Peninsula. We had it in Joseph Smith's Head. And all these presentations have differed significantly. They've been given by people who are confident in what they're presenting because they have a good factual basis from which to work. But when we can come to appreciate the commonalities and work from those instead of the differences, what are the commonalities in terms of the fundamental message of the book? And there we find that people agree that it is the message of Christ encouraging people to accept the promise of the promised land, to move from being people of conflict to becoming people of peace. And when we begin to embrace the commonalities and work from those, then the differences can be muted a little bit and we can disagree on those, but because we have the more fundamental agreements, then we can be friends and continue to seek out the truths that we can gather by reasoning together respectfully. Well, as division and suspicion became more widespread, only a few people from each of the four groups still remembered their creator. Sotukdang opened a huge ant mound and told those people to go to live in it with the ants while he destroyed the world with fire. He told them to learn from the ants while they were there. That's an interesting point, don't you think? People, we need to learn from the ants. The people went down and lived with the ants, who had storerooms full of food that they gathered in the summer, as well as chambers in which people could live. And this went on quite a while because after Sotukdang cleansed the world with fire, it took a long time for the world to cool off. And as the ants' food ran low, the people refused the food, but ants kept feeding them and only tightened their own belts, which is exactly why ants have such tiny waists today. Fascinating, isn't it? Here is one of those grasps of reality that shows our relationship with the animals that have fed us and taken care of us. Finally, Sotugdang was done making the second world, which is not quite as beautiful as the first. He admonished the people to remember their creator as they and the ants that had hosted them spread across the earth. The people multiplied, soon covered the entire earth. They did not live with the animals, however, because the animals of the second world were wild and unfriendly. Instead, the people lived in villages and built roads between those so that trade sprang up, and they stored goods and traded for those goods from elsewhere, and soon they were trading for things they did not need. Interesting. Trading for things they did not need. As their desire to have more and more grew, they began to forget their creator. I think that's worth repeating. As their desire to have more and more grew, they began to forget their creator. And soon, wars over resources and trade were breaking out between villages. Finally, Sotukdang appeared before the few people who remembered the creator, and again he sent them to live with the ants while he destroyed this corrupt world. And this time he ordered Pokangwaya and Palangwaya to abandon their posts at the poles, and the world spun out of control and rolled over. The mountains slid and fell, and lakes and rivers splashed across the land as the earth tumbled, and finally the earth froze over into nothing but ice. This went on for years, and again the people lived with the ants. Finally, Sotukdang sent Potungaya and Polangaya back to the poles to resume the normal rotation of the earth. and soon the ice melted and life returned. So Tugdang called all the people up from their refuge, and he introduced them to the third world that he had made. And again, he admonished the people, remember your Creator, as they spread across the land. As they did so, they multiplied quickly, even more quickly than before, and soon were living in large cities and developing into separate nations. With so many people and so many nations, soon there was war, and some of the nations made huge shields on which they could fly. And from these flying shields, they attacked other cities. These Hopi are a little bit prophetic. When Sotokdang saw this war and destruction, he resolved to destroy this world quickly before it corrupted a few people who still remembered the Creator. He called on Spider Woman to gather those few, and along the shore she placed each person with a little food in the hollow stem of a reed. When she had done this, Sotokdang let loose a flood that destroyed the warring cities and the world in which they lived. Flood stories are something that happens around the world. Once the rocking of the waves ceased, Spider Woman unsealed the reeds so the people could see. They floated on the water for many days, looking for land, until finally they drifted to an island. And there they built little reed boats and set sail to the east. After drifting many days, they came to a larger island. After more days, to an even larger island. They hoped this would be the fourth world that Sotokdang had made for them, but Spider Woman assured them that they still had a long and hard journey ahead. They walked across this island and built rafts on the far side and set sail to the east again. They came to a fourth and still larger island, but again, they had to cross it on foot and build more rafts to continue east. And from this island, Spider Woman sent them out alone, and after many days, they encountered a vast land. Its shores were so high they could not find a place to land, and only by opening the doors in their heads did they know where to go to land. Only by opening the doors in their heads did they know where to go to land. When they finally got ashore, Sotokdang was there waiting for them. As they watched to the west, he made the islands that they had used as like stepping stones disappear into the sea. He welcomed them to the fourth world, but he warned them that it was not as peaceful or beautiful as the previous ones, and that life here would be harder, with heat and cold and tall mountains and deep valleys. He sent them on their way to migrate across the new land in search of the homes for their respective clans, and the clans were to migrate across the land to learn its ways. Although some grew weak and stopped in the warm climates or rich lands along the way, the Hopi trekked far and wide and went through the cold and icy country to the north before settling in the arid lands between the Colorado River and the Rio Grande. They chose that place so that the hardship of their life would always remind them of their dependence on and link to their Creator. The Hopi are people who continue to try to give honor to their Creator. The Hopi unification refers to both the historical gathering of distinct clans into mesa-top villages from 700 to 1300 AD to form a cohesive, peaceful agricultural society, and to the spiritual philosophy of bringing together the four colors of humanity to create global balance. Moving on to Egypt. I would pause if there's questions or comments. I don't see Deb waving at me, so I'm going to proceed. The ancient Egyptian calendar was a 365-day system designed around the Nile's annual flooding and the star Sirius. It comprised 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days, divided into 3 seasons: the season of inundation, that of emergence and growing, and harvest or low water. This wandering calendar slowly shifted against the solar year, and they had several calendrical systems to mark the passing of time: a lunar calendar, a civil calendar, and a solar calendar. Like us, the Egyptian civil calendar divided the year into 12 months, with each month consisting of 30 days, equaling 360 days in a year. Then each of the 12 months had 3 weeks. The work week was 9 days long, followed by 1 day of rest. And also like us, they divided their days into 24 hours, with a standardized 12 hours for daylight and 12 to mark the passing of night. And it should be noted here, I think, that that when Julius Caesar encountered Cleopatra, the Roman calendar was 70 days out of sync with reality, and so he adopted the Egyptian calendar, and we've had 3 generations of changes on that calendar to make our Gregorian calendar, the one we use today, still less accurate than the one the Mayas had from 2,000 years ago. But with the rise of the Sirius star and the increasing waters, the inundation season would make up the first month, and this was the time when the melting waters in the Ethiopian highlands would raise the levels of the Nile to rise, flooding on its banks on either side. For the Egyptians, they sought the source of the Nile and inundation in a cave around Aswan, and in turn personified this power of nature as Hapi, the fertile god of inundation. In the great hymn of the inundation, a text surviving from the Middle Kingdom, the poet calls upon the power of Hapi to bring forth the inundation over Egypt. It lasted about 4 moons or 4 months, from start to finish, and would be followed by the growing season. And then, as this time, they would plow and plant, and the harvest season would be the one that followed that. And so each of those was a 4-month process, and the harvest then brought him to the end of the annual cycle. Belief in an afterlife and a passage to it is evident in the pre-dynastic burials, which are oriented to the west, the domain of the dead. The big pyramids are on the west side of the Nile. It is interesting that the Valley of the Kings is on the east side, but that's much farther up the river. Okay, now the dead includes the pottery, grave goods, as well as personal possessions of the deceased. And then they introduced mummification, related to the idea that the body must continue intact for the deceased to live in the next world. And this comes from the cult of Isis, which was a very profoundly influential myth for the Egyptians, and I think it has some impact upon us. For the myth of Osiris shows some analogies with the gospel story, and the figure of Isis, or the role of Virgin Mary, the iconography of the Virgin and Child has some affinities with Mary and Horus. And then one aspect of the Egyptian religion may have contributed a little bit here to Christianity. But let me give you a bit about the Isis and Osiris myth. The images on the right there, you have the falcon head, which is Horus. In the middle is Osiris, and on the right is Isis. In the Golden Age, Osiris was the wise and benevolent first pharaoh of Egypt, credited with teaching humanity agriculture, law, and religion. His queen, Isis, was a deeply intelligent, devoted goddess of magic and healing, and protector of the women. The betrayal was Osiris's brother, Set, the god of chaos, grew violently jealous. Set tricked Osiris into a beautifully crafted coffin, trapped him inside, cast him in the Nile River, murdering him. Heartbroken, Isis used her magical powers to find the coffin, but Set found the body, chopped it into pieces, and scattered them across Egypt. Isis traveled across the land, collecting the 13 scattered parts, and with the help of the deities Anubis and Thoth, she reassembled her husband and temporarily brought him back to life to conceive their son Horus. The lord of the underworld, because he could no longer stay in the living world, Osiris descended to the underworld, where he became the king of the dead and judge of the souls. Horus eventually grew up, defeated Set, and took the throne, restoring balance and order. Notice the restoration of balance and order. Unlike the Middle Eastern traditions where humans were created as an afterthought or mere servants to the gods, the Egyptians believed they were made in the image of the Creator. They were tasked with maintaining the Ma'at, the fundamental order, balance, and justice of the universe, and supporting the gods in the eternal cycle of life. A little bit like Tepu Gugumatsu or the Hopi deities, everybody wanting, all the gods wanting the people to respect them. Anyway, human beings are uniquely formed from Khepri's tears, distinguishing them from other creations. Now, this is fun for me because as a boy growing up on the farm in Iowa, I frequently had the chore of driving cattle from the pasture up the lane to the barn for milking. And that lane, a quarter of a mile long, would have the cow pie droppings. And from the cow pie droppings, here came the dung beetles. Dung beetles would roll up the manure and the cow pie into little round balls. In the summer sun, those little round balls got baked, and so this little boy enjoyed picking up those little round balls and playing marbles with them. Well, and then I got to discover that there's 1,000 different species of dung beetles, and they put their eggs in those little round balls. And in Africa, they'll take a 3-foot pile of dung from an elephant and spread that dung around to fertilize the area around it. So they are extraordinarily proficient fertilizers of the future. And so when we talk about the myth of tears distinguishing from other creatures, this comes from the scarab beetle that emerges from the lotus. The scarab is a solar symbol, and the text describe how this beetle transformed into a child. When the child cried, his tears became humankind. So using a potter's wheel and Nile mud, Noom molded the 4 distinct groups of people to populate the earth: the Egyptians, the Asians, the Libyans, and the Nubians, all of which, of course, the Egyptians attempted to conquer. And so here I am still moving along, this time to China. And the primary Chinese creation myth centers on Pangu, who was a giant born within a cosmic egg of chaos. Notice the interesting combination of chaos and order again. Containing intermingled yin and yang. And after 18,000 years, he awoke and split the egg with an axe, creating the sky yang and the earth yin. Pangu grew daily, holding him apart for another 18,000 years until he died, his body parts forming the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and the elements of the world. When the firstborn Pangu was approaching death, his body was transformed, his breath became the wind, clouds, his voice became the peals of thunder, his left eye became the sun, his right eye became the moon, his 4 limbs and 5 extremities became the 4 cardinal points of the 5 peaks, his blood and semen became water and rivers, his muscles and veins became the earth's arteries, his flesh became fields and land, his hair and beard became the stars, bodily hair became plants and trees, his teeth and bones became metal and rock, his vital marrow became pearls and jade, his sweat and bodily fluids became streaming rain, and all the mites on his body were touched by the wind and evolved into the black-haired people. We are, for black-haired, we are from the mites. The Tao Te Ching, written sometime before the 4th century BCE, suggests a Chinese cosmology that has some allusions to that creation, that there was something featureless yet complete before heaven and earth, silent, amorphous. It stood alone and unchanging, and we may regard it as the mother of heaven and the earth, commonly styled the way. Notice, again, I'm coming back to that big question mark. Silent, amorphous, the way. With Tao, nothingness gave rise to existence. Existence gave rise to yin and yang. Yin and yang gave rise to everything. And so let me share with you the story of Lao Tzu's horse, because I think that in order to grasp something of the Chinese picture, this one is instructive. Lao Tzu is remembered as having gone out to his stable one day and discovered that the gate was broken. His horse had run away. His neighbor came over and commiserated with him. "Oh, Lao Tzu, you're in a disastrous situation without your horse. How are you going to plow? If you can't plow, you can't raise any food. If you can't raise any food, you're going to die." Lao Tzu said, "Well, you sort of have to take things as they come." And the neighbor went away shaking his head. But the next day, the horse returned leading a herd of 20 horses. And so Lao Tzu quickly extended his fence and got the 20 horses in, and the neighbor came over, and the neighbor said, "Well, Lao Tzu, you've been remarkably blessed. You better go to the temple and offer some sacrifices. Matter of fact, if you'd like to sacrifice one of those horses, I have a place for it." And he was just exuberant over Lao Tzu's good fortune. And how do you hold yourself in? I mean, here he was 20 times wealthier than he was the day before, because that gave him horses he could sell and expand his lands with. Oh, wow, this is a tremendous opportunity. And again, Lao Tzu said, well, sort of have to take these things. Notice yesterday the horse ran away and I didn't have anything. Well, the next day, the Lao Tzu's son was out breaking one of the horses, trying to make it so he could ride it, got bucked off and got his leg broken. And Lao Tzu's neighbor came over. Oh, my friend, that leg looks bad. That broken bone sticks through the skin there. If it gets an infection and your son dies, then you won't have any posterity. If you don't have any posterity, your life dies with you and you're gone. Oh, wow, I'm so sorry for you here. This is a disaster. Maybe you better go to the temple and offer a sacrifice in order to try to get back in good with the gods. Lao Tzu said, well, we'll take things as they come, and notice that yesterday I was blessed, today you're saying I'm cursed, but then maybe there's a bit of blessing in that too. And the following day, the conscription officer came from the army looking for all the young men that could be drafted and carried off to feed the cannons. Lao Tzu's son was there with a broken leg, so could not be conscripted in the army. So you understand that there is in this combination of yin and yang, the combination that comes to us all the way from that great question mark at the beginning. That combination has the mix of the good and the bad in it. It has the mix of the blessings and the curses, but through it all, there is a balance to be obtained. One more, and this one is the history's destiny as seen through evolution, which is change in inheritable traits within a population across generations. Our diversity is explained by common ancestors with small variants through natural selection. And take, for example, here the wolves. The gray wolf is the common ancestor for 340 dog breeds. That's rather amazing, isn't it? I got to uncover the bones of a canine in Nauvoo that dated back 5,000 years. And to see how many generations of new breeds of dog have been put together just in the last 500 years is by itself amazing. But to have a chance to dig back and find the bones of an early one was for me rather fascinating. Well, just delightful. But notice that we have dogs associated with Europe, North America, China, and India, and just the wide variety of variants there is a set of inheritable traits passed on by a gene pool that has been modified, selected for human preference. And for the humans, back during the 1960s and 70s, fossils were being found in East Africa in the regions of the Olduvai Gorge and Lake Turkana. Louis Leakey and his wife Mary and their son Richard and daughter-in-law Maeve were fossil hunters, and they found Pithecanthropus and numerous other possible prehistoric humans, hominids, and they worked particularly in the Olduvai Gorge and Lake Turkana region. Those funds really focused on Africa as the cradle of humankind. In the late 70s and 80s, then Ethiopia emerged as the new hotspot for paleoanthropology, especially after in 1974 when Don Johanson found Lucy, the most complete fossil member of the Australopithecus afarensis, yet known to that date. That was near Hadar in the Afar Triangle region of northern Ethiopia. The earliest member of the genus Homo is Homo habilis. And Homo habilis appears to have evolved almost 3 million years ago, was the first species for which we have positive evidence of the use of stone tools. But in the next million years, a process of encephalization began, and by the arrival about 2 million years ago, Homo erectus cranial capacity doubled, and we have Homo erectus on the scene. Those were the first hominids to migrate from Africa from 1.8 to 1.3 million years ago, and that Homo erectus species is the one that spread through Africa, Asia, and Europe. And the question of just how much of the Homo erectus, like the modern Well, the lady and the Homo looking at each other, a little bit of fun there. The modern Homo sapiens skeleton or cranium is on the left, and the Homo sapiens neanderthalensis on the right. Neanderthal became extinct between 40 and 20,000 years ago. However, it is quite clear that the Neanderthal DNA continues to appear in modern humans. And so I'm convinced, as an anthropology teacher, I was convinced that we had, well, one of the teachers I worked under to me looked like a Homo erectus. And so I could easily point to him. My students would recognize, yeah, he probably carries those genetics. But at that time, we didn't have the DNA. Now we do, and the DNA shows quite conclusively that there was interbreeding between the Homo sapiens neanderthalensis and the Homo sapiens sapiens. So most of us will have perhaps 3% of our DNA traces back to the Neanderthal. So now, what does evolution have to say about the end of history? Well, you can see on the top left that you've got a progression from ape-like creatures up to the man with a spear, then one with a rake, one with a jackhammer, and then one with a computer. But then on the right, you see that same process. The one turns around, we messed up everything. And on the left, you can see us getting older, fatter, uglier as we go up to 900 years. There is one thesis that says that we are becoming gods in our human evolution. And over on the right, you'll notice that we have one position that says we are becoming we survive by becoming Homo sapiens pacificus, becoming peaceful people. And that while the writers of that were using pacificus as a pacifiers, um, I believe that really there is possibilities for us to be people of peace. All right, so now here we have the themes, and you can add more themes, but you'll see what I've done is try to give you a few themes to work with. At this point, I'd certainly like to encourage your participation because start with theme A, the world has changed. It has produced order from chaos, and that shows up in Genesis. It shows up in the Maya. It shows up in the Hopi. It definitely shows up in Egypt, in China, and in evolution. So there are some themes like this in the diachronic themes that go all the way through. But then there are some themes that don't go all the way through. So, and I've left some pretty well empty for you to consider. The gods or the gods, the big question mark. Um, Genesis, in the beginning, God. The Maya tell us it was Tepehu and Gukumats. The Hopi say it was Spider Woman, and Tewa. Egypt says it's Isis and Osiris. China's Pangu. Evolution. It's there too, I think. You're welcome to jump in. Uh, Letter C, women take a significant, oftentimes that's a subservient role. It is that way with Genesis. Then with Maya, with the Hopi spider grandmother, I would say is not particularly subservient. So I did not put an X on that one. But certainly ISIS is significant in Egypt and in China. Um, all of us nits making lice. And with the evolution, I think, yeah, clearly the mitochondrial DNA speaks for us there. Notice I didn't put much of anything on man and animals are related. What do you think? In Genesis, man and animals are related, or are they separate? What do you think?
Well, it says that man was created first, the first flesh on the earth, so that would be separate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and with the Maya,
But shouldn't
go ahead.
shouldn't evolution have a big X there on D?
Well, I'm happy to put one. I left a bunch of them blank, anticipating that people like you would say, "Hey, we ought to have an X there."
Yeah, we ought to have an X there.
Okay, oh, I can't do it. Can't put an X out
That's
without
okay. That's
messing
okay.
things up.
I'm not offended or anything.
Okay, did I lose it altogether? Mm, I don't see things the way I saw it before, so I messed up. What are you seeing?
Themes. The world has changed. Order from chaos.
We're
Genesis,
You're,
Maya, Hopi, Egyptian.
you're still seeing the chart. Okay, good.
we're seeing it, but we're seeing the whole, uh with your slides on the left.
Okay,
And it just went to
is that better? No, that's
okay, it's the
worse.
same.
Oh, wow. Well, let's see. Did I get it back for you so you're at least seeing the world has changed themes?
We can
We
still
have just now.
Okay. So, yeah, animals and men are related. That's one of those themes that follows diachronically through. Mistakes have gotten us to where we are. Um,
Genesis ought to have a
Big one there,
yeah.
huh?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that's probably one that goes all the way through. But go ahead, Earl.
yeah. Well, there's mutations with every generation,
Right,
or
right.
these mutations are selective. If they are positive, then they get carried on. If they're negative, they die out. So,
Yeah, that's a line where X's would be on every one of them, as I see it.
mhm.
And then something divine in our inheritance. The Genesis would
Boyd has a question, Paul.
yes, go ahead. Boyd.
Yeah, Paul, is there a category that I'm looking at that identifies each of these? Is there a belief in some heaven there's in their belief system? Um, like evolution, I'm not too sure there's a belief that there is a heaven or there's some kind of world where, there's a spirit in the unseen world that, that's created. Um, but is there a category here that I'm overlooking that identifies whether to have like a heaven or unseen world?
Thank you for raising the question, but no, I have not put that in. But that's my intent to provide you a chance to put that kind of a question out here. Let's give that to the people and see what we think. Um, we clearly pull heaven into Genesis, um, although um, the idea that we should be having heaven on earth, living on earth as with heaven as a standard. Um, but well, and you notice the Maya had four different worlds, and so Tukdang would apparently be occupying heaven. I'm sorry, that's Tepe and Gukumats. So Tukdang on the Hopi. Um, the Egyptians' resurrection idea somewhat speaks of heaven, but it's really also addressing the future of the earth as a place for the resurrected. But we ought to be mummified in order to be able to get there. And the Chinese, we talk about Pangu, 18,000 years, then another 18,000 years. And so he's the formation of heaven and earth. So, except for evolution, then I think the rest of them do have some form of heaven. But that's fine, I think, because when you're looking at an orchestral score, you drop out themes once in a while and pick them up again later. And so Levi Strauss was attempting to encourage us to study things this way because if we can pick up the themes that are meaningful and cross-cultural, then we're probably getting closer to the truth than if we're looking at isolated themes. But thank you, Boyd, for raising that because the question of heaven is one that could readily be added. The tug and pull relationships, I marked a few of them. Um, but please, I'd like to throw it open then for your questions, comments. I uh, I think that all of them have the humans created from natural elements, and I didn't mark the valuing of breath, but I didn't mark that peace becomes our intellecty, but I believe that is the common theme that works perhaps through all. Some question about evolution.
If you look at evolution, though, it does follow more or less the same sequence as Genesis does. So you first had, you know, bacteria and stuff in the water, and they came out of the water onto the land, and on the land they had, well, even some animals that were both land and water, like the alligators. And from there, we came to the large animals that laid eggs, and that would be the dinosaurs. And after the dinosaurs went away, the human beings became the dominant species of the world.
The dinosaurs of the world. I should be careful about my political comments here, should I? All right. Thank you, Earl. Yes. Yes, I think it is useful to. I appreciate that any viewpoints that you all have to offer are welcome at this stage. I've completed my presentation, and so I'm open for your questions, comments, and yeah, I appreciate everything you want to say. Go ahead, Boyd. You got your hand up.
You got a question here. When you're in the area of China, you talked about the Tao Te Ching,
Now, Ching.
and yeah, and pull that slide up if you would, and I saw something in there that caught my eye. Yeah, okay. In the middle there, it says that in the highlighted yellow, it says we may regard it as the mother of heaven and the earth, commonly styled the way. How many cultures do you know of uses the term the way?
It's pretty widespread.
And is it in Native American cultures?
Yes.
Okay, because that's where I've come across it a few times, and I was wondering if it was um, widespread or uh, and what other cultures have you come across it?
Well, most cultures consider their own culture to be the way. Other
Okay.
people, the other people um, are off the road. The other people, the other people are louse eggs. We're the humans. They are the louse eggs. They are the vermin. Um,
Hmm.
but because we have the way, we are the most civilized. We are the greatest. We are the ones closest to the divine. And most cultures have a bit of that tribalism, that ethnocentric bias for themselves. I think probably all cultures do. And so, to that extent, then there is the implicit idea that our culture is the way and yours needs to learn from us. The more we learn, the more we learn from other people's other cultural, those of us with a cross-cultural marriage can appreciate how erroneous that approach is. But
Hmm.
it's a fascinating thing to see, look at our own culture and see, yes, here we are the ones that are right. They're the ones that need to learn to eat our kind of food. They're the ones that need to follow our kind of laws, use our driving patterns, follow our calendar, use our dollars. Um, we have a tendency to want to be the way and require other people to accommodate that. We're not nearly as
Well, I'm wondering.
to
Huh?
be empathetic toward others.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if there's more than one usage here because there's well, like Christ said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Um, you have that particular um, way of usage that the Lord was using it. but there's like I don't think that the Lord is actually using the word the way as a place, like, in heaven, to me, it's the direction, it's the pathway where that's just where I'm feeling on it anyway. But then there's some cultures that I've seen where they use the term the way to mean like you're going on the other side. It's like a place in the unseen world where they can actually go to. You know what I mean? And this is what it looks like in this particular here. It looks like it's a place and not a pathway. Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying, but I don't quite agree with it because while it's talking about the Mother of Heaven and Earth, which we like to consider as places, and yet heaven is uh, is part of that big question mark place where God is, the big question mark. And so to get there, what is the way? Again, to me, that is the passage. It is the process. And so for us to learn the way of peace is, I believe, the modern call and the call of Christ. And so I see the two as converging, if not being the same.
I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. There's a record, I don't know if you've heard of it, probably have. It's called the Naaman record or the Mantina Archives. And the way it was translated by Philip Landis is that he said that he and a couple of other people in different parts of the world, they would go on to the way, which is a place on the unseen world somehow. Their spirit will, what I understand is their spirit would leave their body. They go out there and they communicate with each other on the way in this unseen world. And then they will manage to do their translating of the record. Are you familiar with that?
Vaguely familiar. I would call to your attention that in Spanish, El Camino Real is the royal way, the royal road, and that corresponds rather
Mm-hmm.
nicely with the way as and the Catholics will walk hundreds of miles on the Camino Real in order to get to a place of pilgrimage. And so that is an attempt, I think, to to take an ideal and transform it into a real passageway. So you're right, the real passageway does exist and even may be extended into the ethereal beyond.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. I like
Right. Thank you.
the, the, the old teacher in me likes this stuff of having good questions raised. Come on, students, go after more questions or comments. Any other areas I need to go back to review for somebody to get a point clarified? To me, the connections between the Egyptians and Christianity is fascinating. And then particularly to see that Julius Caesar basically adopted the Egyptian calendar and turned it into the basis of our own. Fascinating. But the whole idea of Isis being able to resurrect Osiris and that resurrecting process is ultimately what brings us to a balance in the world. Um, Fundamentally, our guide Ahmed pointed out to us during his presentation that the outcome of Egyptian mythology is ultimately peace. Anybody get offended with my treatment of Genesis through James Weldon Johnson? I did that at church once and had a lady ask the pastor to have me sit down. Oh wow, some years back. Go ahead, Boyd.
Well, I hate to dominate it, but since everybody's not saying anything, I decided I'd jump in again. Um, this slide you're on right now, it talks about the Mayan calendar ending in December 21st, 2012. And I think most of us probably are familiar with that, but what I can't remember on this on the top of my head is what is the significance of that date other than the calendar ending on that date? Because you pointed out that the calendar actually extends beyond that somehow, but what do you think on it?
Well, from the Maya perspective, that was the end of the Baktun. That was that's the Baktun, the 394 years of empire building. That's the characterization of the past Baktun. The new
Mhm.
Baktun should be the 300 and 94 years of women ruling and turning us from empire building into people of peace.
Okay.
So
Of
that's
course,
a
yeah,
very general kind of characterization of the time span. But it is interesting that we do that through history. So we go back and look at the Dark Ages, we look at the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and so forth, and stick a label on a time period and think that's somehow meaningful. It may be more distortive than it is actual beneficial. But again, it is the Maya translation here, and so I am intrigued that they project peace in this current back to.
yeah, that is fascinating. They would predict peace. I think they kind of missed that one a little bit, didn't they?
Well, it's certainly not an immediate occurrence, but I'm hopeful. I mean, to see that to me the cross cultural theme of seeing the arc of history toward peace is fascinating, hopeful, and well, it's part of our faith. The gospel is a gospel of hope. The gospel is a
Mhm.
gospel of peace. And for us to be participants in that gospel, people of faith, people of hope, people who are agents of the Prince of Peace, people who choose to be people of peace, whether agents of the Prince of Peace or not. I mean, uh, I think we see the power of the agents of the Prince of Peace well beyond Christianity. And so we really need to be able to work with all the people of peace around the world in order to bring that about. For compassion, which is such a fundamental human dimension, human capability, is something that is missing in narcissistic people. And so to be able to choose people to be our leaders who are not narcissistic but are peaceful people would make a major difference in the directions that we're led.
Okay, well, Blair's on there. I'm not going to get into what.
Yeah, well, let's hear from Blair.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on the Coptic religion. The Coptic religion came out of Egypt immediately, almost after um, the crucifixion, and it was a merging of the Christianity and the Coptics. and the Egyptian. I found that interesting, and the Coptic religion still has adherents today. In fact, in our town, there is a Coptic church not very far from here. I don't know the significance of it, but it was apparently very quickly picked up by the Egyptians as one of the earliest of the Christian religions outside of the Catholic Church, as I understand it. Just a comment.
Well, let me reinforce that comment because thank you. It's an enhancing one. I had the privilege of visiting Coptic Church in Cairo, which houses the cave where Jesus was kept as a baby. They have traced the journey from Bethlehem to Egypt and have calculated where he was throughout that journey. And so here is one Coptic church which houses a cave where Jesus stayed for several months. And so you're right. Here is one of the earliest renditions of Christianity, and they are it's it's a fascinating religion, and I don't know enough about it to be able to trace it through the whole set of themes. But you're right. They are one of the closest to the origin of the Christ story of all. Interesting to me that Tariq Aziz was Coptic. Tariq Aziz was one of Saddam Hussein's advisors. He was the ambassador to the United Nations for Saddam Hussein. So George W. put him, I believe, as the nine of spades on the cards of people that he wanted assassinated. And I found that offensive because Tariq Aziz, as a Christian, was doing what he thought was his appropriate duty to try to give appropriate representation internationally to the government that he represented. And even though he disagreed a lot with Saddam Hussein, nonetheless, he, as the agent of that government, helped it to maintain decent standing. It happened that I represented Tariq Aziz first day of class in my class at Shining Mission East, and I had just had a precancer growth removed from my forearm, and it looked like a bullet hole.
Mhm.
And so kids saw the bullet hole and they heard me in costume giving a speech as Tariq Aziz, urging that United Nations people ought to be given credit, amnesty, and support rather than being put on the cards as somebody to be assassinated. And the principal came to me later that week wanting to know when Mr. DeBarthe was coming back because parents had discovered that Mr. DeBarthe hadn't been there all week. Tariq Aziz had been there instead.
Oh,
it, I found it delightful.
my goodness. Well, I was going to say something. I don't know how it fits in exactly, but I did hear something while we were reading some of these principles or these different cultures about noticing the things we have in common instead of the things that we are indifferent about. I thought that was pretty much of an idea that we could put in place right now when we do our talking together as nations. Um, to dwell on something a little different than the differences and the arguing, but to look at the things that we do have in common and that we can agree on. Another thing I wondered about ISIS and that whole story there, I can't even remember the names now, but the idea that they put him back together, that he cut him up and
sending him to all these different places, and then they put him back together. And the only way I can think that could possibly happen is if he was a robot and gathered the pieces up and put them back together, and he was still alive again, before she had her second child. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about tonight, but that was two things that caught my interest.
Hmm. Well, thank you, Dee, for recognizing the theme of commonalities, because you notice that several of the cultures are expecting things to be put back together. The Hopi anticipate that the tablet that was broken as the people left the third world to come into the fourth, that the Hopi have part of that broken tablet, the white men have another part. When they bring those back together again, then we can learn to live together in peace. So again, reassembling from the past to 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 bring balance, to bring integrity back. That's a common theme. And I've looked at numerous other cultures, other mythologies as well, and I selected these in part because they do share so many commonalities, but also because they're more complex than some of the others. But it's fascinating to see across the world that quest for balance, for coming together in common, to treating each other with compassion. That those are international themes that are deeply embedded in the mythology. Um, I would just as an illustration, in the wintertime, I was walking along 75th Street, which is a four-lane highway here in my community, and it was cold. A gentleman drove his car up beside and rolled down the window and looked over and asked if I wanted a ride. It doesn't happen very often. The city of Lamoni and something like that happens frequently, but here in Overland Park, Kansas, it's a rarity. Well, I accepted his offer, and he explained to me that he felt the urge that when we have an opportunity to see a stranger, that may be an angel, and so therefore offer him a ride. But to be considered an angel and be offered a ride, he took me all the way home. That was just really a neat little reminder of how deeply that hospitality theme rides in our culture. And it's strange now that we are taking out the foreigners, how our hospitality theme is being I think mishandled. But internationally, being hospitable, being compassionate, those are themes that are deeply embedded in the mythologies of virtually every culture. There are a few which are particularly violent cultures, and I've noticed I had a professor, Robert Smith at KU, who was studying a group of people that were going through ethnocide in South America, and the painful process that they were going through is something he studied for 30 years. But their compassion, their hospitality, their sense of meaning, and their sense of belonging both got eroded to the point that they could no longer live. So being able to hold our the meaningful themes of life together is crucial to our well-being. And that's internationally understood and applied in our cultures.
Oh,
Yes, go ahead, Earl.
you said something about the Coptic and one of the people who were advisors to Saddam Hussein was a Coptic,
Yes.
and they put his picture on a deck of cards. On what was that? What was that again? Is that the ace or the king? Or
No, I think it was. I think if I remember correctly, it was the nine of spades. But George W. Bush had a deck of 52 cards of people that he thought were especially subject to be sought out and either assassinated or else prosecuted by international law. I don't think it would have been international law because the United States never signed the treaty for to support international law, the international court system. So my memory of it is that George W. would publish that list of 52 cards to highlight people that he thought needed to be disposed of.
I have a deck of cards when around the time of Saddam Hussein, and it has all pictures of all of his leaders and so forth. With
Oh, you have that list?
I've got the deck of cards.
Wow. And you have one for yes. Yes. Okay. Wow. How did you happen to acquire that?
Well, I don't know. I also acquired one for um, presidential campaign for John F. Whatever his name was, not Kennedy, huh? I think it's Curry or something, huh? Kerry,
John Kerry.
Kerry. So,
Wow.
and just interests me, and so I've also got a lot of cards from the Pan Am too.
And so, am I correct that Tariq Aziz is in the spades category? I think perhaps number 9, or it,
Can you read it?
yeah, I can see it, but I can't read it.
Okay,
Is that
I
him?
can't. I don't know. That's a 9 of spades.
Okay, well, I can't read if that's Tariq. It doesn't quite look right to me. So I may very well have misremembered which card he was on, but
Hmm.
yeah, there's the evidence that George W. was putting the faces of the enemies of the United States on the cards to make them targets.
Yeah. Of course, the
Hey,
deck of
Earl.
cards. Yes.
Hey, Earl. Did I hear you right? That John Kerry also put together a deck of cards
Yep.
with his enemies on it?
No.
So him and George Bush.
No,
Excuse
his
me.
deck of cards was trying to run for president.
Oh, John Kerry's.
Yeah.
Okay, so he have on his cards.
Let's see. Those cards are out in the kitchen, aren't they? Let me go out the kitchen and take a look.
Okay.
Interesting.
Uh,
I particularly like the anthropomorphism that we get from James Weldon Johnson and God stepped out on space. Just there's such a human quality about God. I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And like a mammy bending over her baby, toiling over a lump of clay until he shaped it in his own image, and man becomes a living soul. Wow. To me, excuse me, but I am enough poetic to appreciate what I think is really good poetry, and to me that is there's a merit to the facts. There's a merit to the truths, and sometimes there are truths that reach beyond the facts. As an archaeologist, well, there's the Kerry card. Now, who else is in that card, the Kerry list, or are they all
Mm.
just Kerry's name?
No, no. Let's see. You pronounce the names. The road to the White House. Bob Sherm, Shrum. That's a joker. 5 is Harold Ford Jr.,
So
sweetheart. Huh?
these are potential cabinet members then.
Right.
I see.
Okay. Yeah, that
Interesting.
makes sense.
And there's one for Barack Obama, U.S. Senator.
Wow. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yep. Anyway, when I flew, I always often picked up a deck of cards for the airlines. So,
Okay.
and then I saw these and I said, hey, I want a copy of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your reinforcement of my memories here, even though my memories may be flawed. But certainly,
Blair, whoops, sorry. Blair has his hand up, Paul.
okay, let's give Blair the chance. Blair has the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I like that picture that's on the screen right now. I'd like to just comment a bit about it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And he said, let there be light. And there was light. We look at that image right there, that's taken from space recently. What do we see? We see light. That light has been there from the very beginning. That light is still there now. That light will still be there from now to eternity. I find that profound. In the beginning, let there be light. And the light is still there. It's never gone out. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. I witnessed that on the first night that I got to spend the overnight on the Pacific between Huahine and Tahiti. I was on the Toporo 3. I had I had missed the boat. I was with my wife and Tehao, a little boy, and we put in at Huahine just on the dock, and I listened carefully for the klaxon from the ship because it was a copra schooner, and so I knew that when it blew its whistle, I had probably not more than 5 minutes to get there. But I was only 5 minutes from the dock when I went to visit Dr. Yoshimoto Sonoto, who was the archaeologist of the Pacific, and so I got to see some of the artifacts that he was finding, and it was just delightful. But I got to the dock and discovered the ship was gone. And so I ended up spending the next day with Dr. Sonoto. He supplied me with a sheet to curl up into that night. And so I got to spend the next day on the mountain. I got to find the 34th Marae on Maeva Hill. They ended up finding 50 of them there, 50 sacred sites that the Polynesians had set up on that westward looking mountain slope. But I got to find the coral representing one of those. And then the following day, I had to work on the underwater site at Ballyhigh Hotel, and there I got to uncover a shell scraper that dated back to about 600 AD, which put it among the very earliest of the period. But it was in the company of a canoe sunken in the area that Ballyhigh Hotel was being constructed. So I got a really good sunburn, but that evening the Toporo 3 came back to the dock, and so I got on. And it was crowded. There was no place in the cabins for someone like me, and so people were on their pareus in the midships. Only place left was up on the bow, and so I went up on the bow. The ship cast off, and that bow got plunging down into the troughs and then rising up on the crests and plunging into the trough and climbing up on the crests. Oh, it was an awesome ride. To be able to ride on the bow and hold your fingers out on both sides of the bow and you cut as it goes down into the trough. You can cut the water with your fingers as you cut into that huge wave. Oh, it was such a sensation. I remember getting excited about it, writing it, decided to write a poem to my dad. I pulled out my notebook and proceeded to write the poem for my dad, and the lights went out. And then shortly, here came a Chinese gentleman demanding my ticket. Ticket, ticket, ticket. Well, I didn't have a ticket, of course. My wife had the tickets. She had the tickets 2 days before, and so I tried to explain to him, but my best English and his Chinese didn't correspond very well. But he did know how to use the word ticket. But it was crazy because he kept repeating ticket, 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 as though if he said it enough times, I could finally produce one. It didn't work that way, so he escorted me to the cabin, and there was this big, beautiful wooden wheel, and I got my camera to take a picture, and he scowled at me and took me to the base down in the hold, where there was a great big Tahitian fellow, probably 350 pounds. And so now I had the Chinese fellow saying, ticket, 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 and the Tahitian fellow, ticket. It was just so insane that they would think that ultimately I could finally produce one. Well, it occurred to me, I had my notebook right there, so I pulled up my notebook and showed that we'd been in Papeete, Tahiti. We went to Raiatea, went to visit the sites of Tapu Tapu Atea and Tainuu. We'd gotten on the Toporo 3, the same boat, had gone to Huahine. I'd gone to see Dr. Yoshimoto Sonoto. The Toporo 3 had left with my wife and my ticket and my son. And when we got to Tahiti, she would undoubtedly meet us there and everything would be okay. Well, using all the place names worked and they understood me. And so instead of a ticket, they proceeded to ask, passport, 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 passport. Of course, my wife had my passport too. I had my sandals, my shorts, my shirt, my notebook, and my camera. And they took the notebook and the camera from me and put it in the hold in a locker. And I went back to the bow, and where I had been thoroughly enjoying that ride before, the sardines I'd eaten for supper began to come alive, and I fed them back to the fish. A rainstorm came, and it was nice to have that wash the tears away from my eyes. But it was pretty. I was a stowaway. I was a criminal. I was somebody that had been marginalized, didn't belong, and had been yelled at for half an hour for not being an appropriate person. And then after breaking through the rainstorm, we came out under the clearest sky that had just been washed clean by that storm. And here were these beautiful stars closer than I'd ever seen before. The Southern Cross was eminent in the sky. I'd always been looking for the North Star, but it wasn't there. The Southern Cross was there instead. And here a satellite went rolling across the sky. And just imagine what it was like for the ancient mariners. What would they have thought of seeing a star going across the sky like that? Wow. But to appreciate that the light from those stars had penetrated thousands of light years to get to me.
Billions.
Billions. And so, yeah, here's Blair pointing out that light continues to penetrate the darkness for billions of years. And that light can be transformed into other forms of energy. That light can be transformed from 186,000 miles per second down to a potato, down to a person. All kinds of other forms of energy can be transformed out of that light. Wow. What an awesome creator with the intelligence to transform that beginning marvelous measure of light into everything that exists. So when I had the privilege of climbing Mount Sinai this January, to be where I am, spoke to Moses. I am the sanction for all being, the voice that put forward the word to create the light. To feel a bit of the whisper of that voice lasting through the ages for me was a profound experience because to be where God had told Moses, take off your shoes. The ground you're standing on is holy ground. And that's everywhere. For us to appreciate that everywhere we stand is holy ground, everywhere we are in the light, that light that God created allows us to participate in eternity. Wow, here you picked up an extra sermon on that one, didn't you? Thank you, Blair. It is 20 till 10, and I do have a meeting in Lamoni in the morning, and so unless there are other questions or comments, let me shut down the slide share.
But the light doesn't go out.
There may be some of our lights being transformed, but when Arena's light went out, I found that she came back to me. The light doesn't really go out. We may not be seeing it anymore. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Being transformed by the divine into another form of energy. So to be able to appreciate the marvelous transformative nature of the divine is something that we need to honor. Teach me, God, to wonder. Teach me, God, to see. Let your world of beauty capture me. Praise to you be given, praise to you be lived. Life be celebrated, joy you give. Teach me, God, to know you, hear you when you speak, see you in my neighbor when we meet. Wow. Let's see the image of the divine in our neighbor when we meet, or even if we don't meet them. Let's be looking for the image of the divine in everyone that we meet and greet, because it's there. Even the strange lady that came to the site this last week, who had to have the police come take her away, there's still something divine in her as well. And I feel so sorry that our culture does not adequately provide for people that are not quite fixed on reality. But the light of the Christ is enough to heal and bless. We need to be part of that, to extend his hands, to extend his hope, to extend his faith, to be people of peace as agents of the Prince of Peace. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you for your attention and your comments, and good night.
Right.